Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Educatedcollins Snap channel. How you doing? So initially, I thought the Spotlight Casters would kind of prevent me from needing to make a Series 4, Series 5 buy list. Kind of thought, okay, it'd be frequent enough and you wouldn't really need tier list anymore. However, since they have not really been doing any spotlight or series drops, anything like that, the series 4 pool is getting bigger, and it's the fact that you still kind of need to know what you want to be spending your tokens on. I would say it's more important than before, because since you have less amount of tokens you're getting per month, you have to be really selective with what you are going to spend your resources on. So I figured it's been a good while, things have changed a little bit, and should be a good time to do a Series 4 buy list. Now, I will be making a Series 5 one as well pretty soon, but for this one, we're just going to cover all the Series 4 cards right now and their priority in the list, whether you should get them or not. Let's begin. So here I do have this tier list. I haven't put the cards in yet. I'm going to be going from the best down to the niche, the not worth resources. I've already ordered them in terms of how good I think they are. So we can just get beginning. So the first one, I would say, surprised myself, but I think it makes sense when you kind of incorporate all the variables. I would say the best Series 4 card right now to buy with resources would be Legion. So I remember we all owe Legion an apology. We weren't familiar with its game. It's definitely a really strong card, especially as a 5/8. I think that helps a lot. It was revealed as a 5/7, but 5/8 really does help a lot. And it just shuts down a lot of compositions. A lot of people are playing Magic right now. As long as you are playing Tempo, Legion shuts that down. There's also a good amount of locations Legion can just give you the edge on. And since you're the one playing Legion, you get to have knowledge on how to take advantage of it. And even if you don't have a good location, its stats are pretty powerful. 5/8 is very reasonable stat line, and it just has that upside of being able to win games by itself. It's a fun card to play, and it's just a card that you will be seeing more of in the future. Like it's a card that's gonna have a place in meta for a while. So when looking through the rest of the Series 4 list, Legion is the one that stood out to me. Legion is the one I would recommend people spend their resources on if they had to pick, which initially was not what I was thinking when this card was revealed, but things have changed, and by far Legion, I would say, is the best card to spend your resources on. So if you sometimes I get asked, hey Collins, I have 3,000 tokens, I want to buy something, what should I get? Definitely Legion's the one I would lean first. Doesn't mean it's the only card you can buy. I think anything above this breakpoint I think is reasonable. You just have to want to be playing with it, and it has to make sense for you. But I think Legion's the best right now. Moving on, Premium. These cards are also still very good, very worth it. I would say they're a little bit below the Legion, but they're still super premium. If you want to spend your resources on these cards, I would say go for it. So the first one in the premium tier list will be Zabu. I still think Zabu is a very, very strong card. It opens up a lot of deck lists. There's like two core build around cards, I would say, on 3 on 4. On 3 you have Silver Surfer, and on 4 you have Zabu. Zabu just gives you the ability to play Darkhawk, gives you the ability to play Mr. Negative, gives you the ability to play Dracula. Any plethora of decks really are balanced around you being able to play Darkhawk on 2. So it's just a really strong Series 4 card. It is coming in a shop, in a Spotlight cast soon. So if you want to save up for that using Spotlights, then you don't have to spend your tokens. But I still think 3,000 token cards are the best bang for your buck in terms of using your token resources. So if you don't want to use your Spotlights there and just buy Zabu that way, I think Zabu is a perfectly fine pickup here. And then the next one as well, I would say, is Spider-Ham. So Spider-Ham did get nerfed. It used to be a 1/1, but that was definitely way too strong. Honestly, the problem with it as a 1 is just it's too easy to include, and it completely counters like some deck archetypes. And it still does, right? Which is why it's still a premium card. But it is more of an investment to put in your deck. However, its payoff is really high. Just being able to shut down some win conditions from your opponent. It also gives you information on what they're playing, which is really good in Conquest, being able to know what their game plan is before they get to play it, lets you not get surprised and have these like 4-8 cube losses. So just a really nice information card that has really nice shutdown properties. So very good use of your resources. Its weakness now is it does require a little bit more effort to put in decks. So the deck design has to be more rigid, I guess, in where you can play the card. But if you can play Spider-Ham in your decks, really powerful tech card to play in. So still think it's very worth your resources. Pretty good and generally very, very solid. So those three, I would say, are the top tier, in my opinion, where perfectly fine getting any of these three. Pretty happy with it for you guys. And still pretty good. But when it comes down to the rest of these cards are worth it, but you really only have a very limited amount of resources. So if you're spending like 12,000 tokens buying 4 Series 4 cards, that could be fine, but maybe it would be better to just save up until you really need to be using your resources. All right. If you have a large amount of tokens, I don't recommend you just using them all immediately. Maybe use 3,000, maybe use 6,000 getting 2 cards and then save the rest of them. It's just much harder to get tokens. So I wouldn't just willy-nilly use all of them immediately. So that's why these three, I would say, like if you're missing them and you want to play with them, you want to get them like perfectly fine. Now this next section I think is also fine, but if you're spending lots and lots of tokens at this point, I would say maybe slow it down. These are the end of be all if you're missing some of these cards. However, if you, let's say you already have these three and you really want something in this next slot, that's perfectly fine. It's just that I don't want people buying like 4 or 5 Series 4 cards and like being like, oh yeah, you know, it was up here. No, I think there is some value in just holding some of your tokens in case you need to react to the meta game or something like that. All right. With that out of the way, let's begin. So the first one I'm going to put in here is still going to be Darkhawk, honestly. Knull is also still in here as well. Darkhawk, Knull, those are both very, very strong cards. Still very flexible, very prevalent, and you'll see them in a lot of decks. So they're perfectly fine to get. However, Knull Red was in the spotlights, and there are more spotlights coming. So a lot of people already have Knull. So, but if you didn't get it, right, it's starting to get expensive. And you never know when things will drop. I'm really still hoping that series drops resume, maybe next month. But these 2 cards are still very strong, very playable. I would recommend getting them eventually. And we still have a couple more in here. I think Stature also fits. Very strong card in the Def Stature deck with Black Bolt. You just get a lot of power, a lot of tempo, and Black Bolt gives you some utility. And with people running Silver Samurai, eventually, I also think Stature is going to get even better since you're going to get Silver Samurai proccing for you. So this might be just a 1/6 in a lot of games without doing anything. So I think Stature is also a very nice card to pick up, especially when Silver Samurai comes out. If that card becomes meta, this could be a very good tech counter to that. Next up is M.O.D.O.K. This card I think is also pretty cool, pretty strong. It's a staple in discard. If you're playing discard decks, you really need this card, I think. It really what makes it shine. If you don't have this and you're trying to play discard, you have to use Hellcow, which is a weaker version and honestly not the same amount of power. this M.O.D.O.K is really what lets Morbius shine. It really makes a lot of your other cards feel really good. It makes your storms consistent, a lot of things. So if you don't have this card, you just lose an archetype to play, and I think that's worth it. And it's a good archetype to play since Spider-Ham isn't as prevalent. So definitely think this is in the worth category. And then the last one here in this category would be Nimrod. So Nimrod, I think, is also very playable. There are other Galactus does make it work, but a lot of times people are just going Shuri and Destroyer, that kind of thing, within a Destroy package, which is perfectly fine. As well as X-23 coming out, so this might be even better once it comes out. So same thing with like Stature, where the cards are coming out that will make it better. I think Nimrod has the same thing, where cards are coming out that's going to make it better. So it's a card you want to keep your eye on, see if it becomes very popular, very prevalent once the synergistic cards are released. So this is a card I think is definitely worth it. And these are the cards I think are worth but expensive. So if you want to get maybe one of these, depending on what the meta shapes out, I think that's perfectly fine. I just wouldn't go and buy every single one of these here. Like, I think that's way too much drain on your resources in terms of tokens. So that's where I have to add that caveat. But these top three, for sure, you can grab them. This one, just wait a bit, maybe see what the meta looks like. And then here we have the break. So anything passed down here, I wouldn't really recommend. So you can see the 6 here. Wouldn't recommend any of these 6 right now. I would say like their issues are either they're niche or they're not worth the resources. So niche in being like the play rate's low and you're really not using them in a large amount of decks or a large amount of time, that it makes sense to use your critical resources on them. I also think these cards are also very likely to be dropped down. I really don't think they're dropping down cards that see a lot of play. I really don't think they're dropping down cards that people want to buy. I think that's their idea, where they're going to be keeping high premium value cards like Darkhawk and Knull and Jeff up in the series, because that's why the spotlights will look appealing. So these cards, I think, are likely some of them to be dropping down. So if you were to spend your resources on these cards and then they drop down, you're going to feel really bad about them. So that's just my guess, right? I don't know for sure. And things can change, but that's my thoughts on why I wouldn't spend your resources on them. Now let's go with the niche cards. So the niche cards are not bad. They're just not popular. They're low play rate, and you don't really have a lot of deck flexibility with them. If you're playing them, you're stucking them into one particular deck archetype, and that's really all you get with them. So there's not a lot of flexibility here, where, Darkhawk, Knull, Stature, M.O.D.O.K, M.O.D.O.K may be less flexible, but still has a lot of different discards you could do with Hela discard and all the other discard types. And Nimrod is also pretty flexible. So these cards have multiple deck lists, while these don't. So with this one, first off, I think Mirage. So these are kind of in order. I would say like Legion number 1, Zabu number 2, Spider-Man number 3, kind of like that. But Mirage, I'd say, is the best of the niche. I actually think this card is good. I think it's playable, but it's just not in a lot of things, and it's not that important. Now, some people will argue that it wins them games sometimes, and I would say like it's a good card, so it's possible for it to win you games. It's just like maybe not necessary in those deck archetypes. Like, you don't need Mirage to do well, where it's very different from Zabu, where if you don't have the Zabu, you can't play decks. Where if you don't have the Mirage, you don't care. You can still play the same deck. It doesn't matter. Spider-Ham wins you some decks. It's not like you need to have Spider-Ham to play some archetypes. The only one you'd really need is synergy with Shadow King, but that's a very niche combo that I would say not a lot of people play around. So, but generally, it still opens up some lines where Spider-Ham will give you an answer where you couldn't get an answer with any other thing. So it's a little bit different, where Mirage is a good card, but not needed, and a bit expensive for what it provides you. So that's kind of my issues with that card in particular. Next up, we have Master Mode. Once again, the card is playable. It's just that you're playing that one Ronin deck with Master Mode, and there hasn't really been like some innovation with the card to see a lot of different people running different archetypes of it. It's kind of annoying, and I would say it can be a tech card in some matchups, which is cool. It's just not common, and it just doesn't shine enough to be worth spending your resources on, and that's kind of the issue here. And the last one, I wonder which one you think. There's one more here. Which one do you think it is gonna be here? Which one, guys? All right, it's Stegron. Yep, that's right. It's not this guy. He does go here, but Stegron I think is also playable. Its issues, maybe it costs too much. 4/5 is very expensive for what it provides, and there's just better move cards, better move cards for sure. Like Spider-Man is kind of the same card, honestly, just cheaper. And Juggernaut does very similar things. So you're paying this extra mana for extra energy for this effect, which is just not worth it, right? You'd just rather have a Spider-Man, or you'd have anything else really to give you that advantage. So just a kind of a weird card, or a weird place for it right now. So just wouldn't recommend it. There's definitely some people that run it and make it work, so it's not a bad card. I would just say, like, comparative to some of the other options you have, this isn't necessarily worth 3,000 tokens, but it's still playable. Now, in terms of not worth resources, I'll say these are like maybe the weakest cards, and they just don't shine. And even in their archetypes, there are better cards to play, and you'd rather do something else. So Spider-Man 2099, unfortunately, I think it just flopped a little bit. It's inconsistent with its ability, where you can't really target where you're going to kill, and it costing 4 is so much in a move deck. A lot of times with a move deck, turn 4 is where you do all your combos, all your crazy things. It starts turn 4 and goes on. And with Spider-Man, one of your best combo turns, like if you're trying to play Vulture into Ghost Spider or anything like that, you don't get to do any of your crazy combos because you have to play the Spider-Man on 4 or 5. So it just doesn't really flow very nicely in the way that a move deck wants to play. So it kind of makes this a slot that sometimes you just don't even want to play it, and it should be really good in the move deck, right? Like that's where it should shine, and it just feels awkward. So I just can't recommend this card right now. Probably needs a change. Maybe if it gets an adjustment in some way, which I think is possible, then we might have to reevaluate the card. But for now, I just wouldn't spend your resource on it. And then Negasonic also has the same kind of issue where do you really want to play this, right? In a destroy deck, I guess. And it's just very like awkward a lot of times, and it's not always a benefit for you. I've definitely seen some games where my opponent played Negasonic, and I could play around it where they couldn't, essentially, where it maybe hurt them more than it hurt me. I was like, maybe I moved my Jeff and it doesn't matter, or something like that, where it for them it was like, what am I gonna do now? So it's not always a positive, and if you have cards that are not always a positive, they have to be really good floors, and the floor for this card is, you kill my 2-drop. Like, it's not great. So I just don't really think it's in a great spot right now, so I would probably just adjust it somewhere. I would adjust it somewhere. And then we have last guard, Snow Guard. It's funny, right? Because Legion and Snow Guard are kind of similar, right? Like, they're kind of similar cards, except one is at the top and one is at the very bottom. It's just awkward. The swapping around is not very beneficial for the player, and it just makes everything more convoluted. And then the restrictions with the ability is actually very, very high. If the restrictions were a little bit less rigid and you could make it work on more locations, then maybe it'd be a lot better. But the amount of locations you really can get a meaningful advantage from Snow Guard is very not impressive at all. And it's just a 1-drop, which has a 1-drop weakness. The base stats isn't super high, and a lot of times it's just not worth a card in your deck, right? Every card has to fight against every other card in its tier, and there's just a lot more better 1-drops. There are better 1-drops to play most of the time. So it just makes Snow Guard an awkward card that really doesn't seem worth it most of the time. So this would be my series 4 tier list, going up from Legion all the down the way to Snowguard. We'll see if they have some series drops, but this is my thoughts right now. Hopefully we can talk about the series drops have changed everything, you know, and now it's better. But for now, what are you guys' thoughts? Do you guys agree with this list? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.
Educatedcollins snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow snap. Your skills will be